And this is a great segue because this is an example of science at its finest. She gave you part of the theory from the work that she's been doing. I will give you the other part of the theory and explanation from the work that Dr. Brown and I have been doing, which is it's also related to a difficulty imagining things beyond what you can see. And so imagining another person's perspective and another person's intentions and the long-term consequences and downstream consequences of something, all of that is about an imaginative, elaborative process. And if you can't do that, then you take things at face value. So I think both of these cognitive experiences contribute. Okay, so hi. It's always my favorite to get to see all of you. And this has been the highlight of my year for 25 years. 25 years ago, we had our first family gathering. And that was before the NODCC existed. It was at an Easter Seals camp. Forgive me, those of you who've heard the story over and over again. I'm starting to sound like my dad. But it was, we brought our sleeping bags. I, at the wise old age of 28, was the speaker because I had a PhD and I had studied this. I was the only speaker who could talk about this condition. And out of that, 25 years later, we have this organization, but not only that, we have organizations around the world. You have an ICD-10 code, a diagnostic medical code for corpus callosum dysgenesis. It didn't exist when we started this. It was just lumped under brain abnormalities. So I give you that background because my talk is going to be about coming from the big picture, about what we as a partnership, what I see where we could go. So I'm going to start with a story because I come from a long line of storytellers. It was about 20 years ago that I was doing research with one of the young men who may or may not even be attending, who's now not a young man anymore, who I dropped off, he and his parents, after doing research at their hotel. And on the way to the hotel, I'm asking the mom some questions, just small talk. And she starts talking about what she does for fun. And one of the things she does for fun is illustrate children's books. And she's a part of this club and they do all this. And it was just really exciting and interesting. And as she closes the door to the car, I said, well, when we write the children's book, I will be in touch. And she shut the door and I thought, what children's book? What did I just say? And I called my dad and I said, it's your fault. And he said, what'd you just come up with? And that is where ACC and me started. That moment, it came out of my mouth before I knew what I was thinking. And I bring it back to my dad because my dad is where I've spent a lot of the last 6 weeks. Though many of you, I'm sure, have this experience of dealing with an aging parent. And I'm very blessed that the aging parent I get to spend time with at 90 is somebody who's still pretty cognitively intact and is kind of my male doppelganger. He and I are a lot alike. So I'm learning about myself as I watch him. And I'm going to talk today using 3 of the things that I've learned from my dad. And one of those is this, that I am a visionary. I see things and I see connections and big picture. And that is part of why we started the NODCCs. One of the other things that I've heard my dad talk about a lot, as he's had some moments where he was badgering friends about, don't do anything that somebody else can do better. Work with them. And amen. It doesn't always work. These days, we can do a lot of things. There are a lot of great tools, software programs. We can do a lot of things on our own, but there's a lot that we can't do. And the NODCC would not exist if it was up to me. It would not exist if it was just up to Barb. But Barb and I, as a team, a mom who really cares, and a scientist who always has new ideas, we're pretty unstoppable at age 30. And here we are. It was that partnership of a group of parents who were really concerned about connecting with other parents and scientists who were really curious that made this happen. And I'm thinking a lot about where do we go from here as a partnership? How do we move forward? One of the other things that my dad always says is, yeah, there's usually an elephant at the end of the string, which doesn't make much sense. I know. But if you think about, like, you pull the yarn, pull the snag on a sweater and you unravel the whole thing, it's that idea. Because my dad and I both have this way of saying, oh, I get it. We could just do, and it's this idea that's simple and it seems so obvious. You just do this and you grab a hold of that string, and inevitably there are elephants. There are all sorts of things. Maybe you should call them tangles, but I like elephants, so I keep it as elephants. There are things that are more complicated than you expected. There are things you didn't know when it started. And so I'm going to come back to that idea in a bit. So Linda did a great job of talking about why we do research on agenesis of the corpus callosum. Oops. The one I want, where did this come from? That's not this. There we go. And the idea that we are overall concerned about quality of life and trying to improve the quality of life of people with corpus callosum disorders. And if we could come up with a cure, that'd be great. But that's not exactly where we're headed, because you can't stop something that had started before birth and in the genes. But you can maybe, like Linda was saying, help the cells function better, recover functioning. But for now, a lot of what we've been doing is focusing on reducing limitations. And so preventing things that we know are common limitations. That's a lot of what Dr. Brown and I have done, is try to understand what are the common limitations so that we can then work on ideas for preventing. Mastering new skills, so learning strategies, ways to cope, compensate. These are kind of the ways we've gone about it so far. And if we can predict the challenges and we can predict the assets, then we can help optimize functioning. We all do that every day. That's why prognosis is so important. If we know that your child is likely to have these challenges, then we can start treatments early. And if we can understand the functional mechanisms of this particular individual's case of dysgenesis of the corpus callosum, then we may even have more information. We may have some genetic or medical kind of treatments that we can use. We may have all sorts of options. So understanding the global, like what happens when you're missing a corpus callosum, is one thing. And that's a lot of the things that we've been working on in the orange. But there's a long way to go in getting the details of the individual variation. And that's where the genetics and the cognitive researchers all coming together and sharing information is so important. Because I look at the behavioral phenotype and Dr. Scheer looks at the medical components of the phenotype as well as behavioral and the genetic. So we all need to be collaborating. So this is how research works. I'm going to simplify it into two ways of thinking about it for you. They're primary studies. There's research studies that we do when we collect research data. And I want to take a second and just thank all of you who have taken time and given your time to our research studies. Dr. Richards just said the same, but I just want to emphasize it. You have given us a gift, and you have given your community a gift. Because every time one of us shares an anecdote, shares an idea, it comes on on the undercurrent, on the foundation provided by the data that you guys have given. We learn everything we know about corpus callosum disorders from our studies. Some of it's from mouse models. For me, it's all from you. So thank you. You may not get immediate feedback. And for my kind of research, often you don't get personal feedback for participating. We can't tell you what your results are. We can't treat you. But your information is the information that allows this to continue. And every year we bring new ideas and new insights. So I wanted to emphasize that I really appreciate what you've given. And that one of my concerns, and I think part of the vision for the future, is how do we take the information that you and all the other families have given over the last, for Warren and I, 30 years. For Linda and Elliot, it's been 25. So we're talking a lot of time and a lot of investment from you as well as each other. How do we use that and have it continue forward and not just get lost as time goes by? So that's one of my compelling questions. There are challenges for collecting data and for doing research. And I could get lost in a lot of that. These are the labs in the United States that are doing DCC research. And there are a lot of expenses involved. And so if you were to ask, honestly, what is our primary limiting factor? Research participation can be one of them, but the money to keep the programs going and to do the research, just to have staff, that's the biggest thing. Because you can't run a business if you don't have a source of income. And if we don't get grants, we don't have a source of income, we can't do our business, and our business is you. So there are lots of expenses that go into this. And the main way that we get research money in the United States is through the National Institutes of Health, national government grants, smaller grants from foundations. But just to give you kind of an idea of all the stuff that goes into the daily, like, for those of you who are business people, practical, this is what we do. We got to be able to do primary research. And this is your team. These are your United States researchers. There are scientists like me who are 100% grant dependent. So if we don't have grants, we don't work. And for others, they might have a salary from the university, but to keep the studies going, it's grant dependent. And the reason I say all of this is if I go out and say, it's important to study just genesis of the corpus callosum, this is so important, there are all these families, they're looking at me and going, yeah, you want to keep doing what you like to do. Well, okay. But if you start saying, this is really important, and you are making a stink and you are letting people know these conditions exist. You as a family organization, raise awareness, make it so that other people know what this is, so that your congressional leaders and any contacts you have know that this is an important thing to fund. Well, they'll listen to you because you're living it. So that's part of what I see as an important need for us on one level, is the foundation of any ideas and people and connections. The NODCC has some initiatives coming up that you'll hear about, and I just wanted you to know why we're asking for that kind of help and why it matters. And this is just to give you an idea. These are several brain conditions that have fairly similar incidents. You can see at the bottom as DCC, which is in purple. And this is the funding that they've received from the National Institute of Health, the number of grants in the last 25 years-ish. So that's just to further emphasize, I do think that parent advocacy makes a difference. Organizing yourselves, getting people aware, getting the government aware that this is a concern and that that people's constituents, that your representatives' constituents want this funded, can make a difference. So that's our curve. I want to see that curve improve. I want to see more funding coming for all of the different types of studies for ACC. The other thing, and this is what Dr. Richards was getting at, that's really exciting. So here's the other visionary part of me. Part of the reason I have a hard time with the whole funding thing is because I'm not a business person. I'm a visionary. So, and I'm a scientist. This is exciting to me. I've always thought that your time is valuable and our time is valuable. I don't like to do things twice. So one of the things that we can do to make research move much more quickly and to use your time more effectively is collaborate. And starting in the early 2000s, I met with Dr. Scheer, and Dr. Brown and I already worked together, and we agreed on these are the research tests we're going to do. If you collected it in somebody and you can share it with me, then I don't have to collect it from that same person, because I don't know about you, but when you go to the doctor and the person at the front desk says, "What's your complaint?" And then the person who takes you back to the exam room says, "What's your complaint?" And then the doctor says, "What's your complaint?" It gets really old, right? So I wanted to optimize your time and make it more efficient. So for the last 20 years or so, we've been collecting the same tests. And the idea being that we could eventually put all of our data, all of those scores and things together and come up with much more innovative new ideas. Well, since we started all this, the advances in computer technology and the advances in machine learning algorithms and computational power, there's so many things you can do in medicine with a bunch of data pulled together and figuring out what are the patterns in this data that tell us how to predict what's going to happen for that patient. So the more people's information you have together, the better those computer programs are at figuring out this is a pattern. This predicts that might happen. And we've got lots of data, and we've for a long time have been collecting the same data so that someday we could put it together. And now's the time. Now those algorithms, now computer science has the potential to really take all that you've given and turn it into new information. And we need your help, because we're barely holding on trying to do our primary studies. And we need your help to build the networks and the resources, working with things like Dr. Richard presented, like the Global Genes. They've developed a platform. So how do we get NRDCC a part of it? How do we build the tools that will allow all of us as researchers to work together to make bigger difference? So working toward the big vision, like my dad said, I always have an idea. And this started with Linda Richards and Elliot Scheer. A little over 10 years ago, we started talking about a consortium. And so we have put together a consortium of researchers around the world who study this condition. Most of them, like us, work with the family organizations in their area. Most of them do this as kind of their volunteer research because they really care about it. And they really want to, they're very invested, is my point. And so they come and we've met and we share ideas, and we get a lot of exciting directions that we could go as the IRC5. So that's the International Research Consortium for the Corpus Callosum and Cerebral Connectivity. And it covers everything from animal models all the way up to human behavior. And we try to meet every year and share resources, but the dilemma is we've been stuck on this sharing resources because we need the system to do it. It sounds simple, And with all of the computer technology out there, it is kind of simple, but it takes manpower and it takes resources. And so that's where we're stuck. That's all I got to say. I'm not, I'm just putting it out there because you are the people who need this, and we would love to be able to do it. And we have vision, and we have really exciting leaders in this field scientifically who are doing primary research. And we need some help with the funding on the primary side. But what you guys as a group can really make a difference on is this: how to do secondary research, how to pull together all that we have collected as individual scientists into a, put all that data into a place where we can share with each other and where future scientists can come and start their careers because they have somewhere to go to, without having to collect the data from all of you. Does that vision make sense? And that's what these pharmaceutical companies have figured out. If they can get all of that data pulled together, then they can start to figure out pharmacological treatments that work. And they can figure out genes that they didn't realize were connected across these different diagnoses because everybody's done their little groups, teeny tiny groups, and not been communicating with each other. So the NODCC, because you're focused on corpus callosum disorders, not on a specific gene, has the leverage and the vision to bring information from a lot of different subgroups together into a really powerful source of information. And so I don't know what just happened to that. That's weird. See if I can drag this window. Tech guy come up here. But that's part of the vision, is that we can do this. We can come up with the tools to put our data together. You have given a lot of natural history information already in my studies and the longitudinal stuff, and in Dr. Scher's, the hours he has spent interviewing you. We have collected the same variables. Let's put it together. Let's create that natural history. We've got it. We need a tool to make it available to the world. And from that, then you're going to get new researchers, then you're going to get more excitement, then you're going to get new studies, and things will go forward. So that's my vision for the collaboration between the two groups that are very much overlapping groups, because we're all on the same team. And I come to you simply with my hands open, because I can tell you what I know and what I can do. And after sitting for 6 weeks with my dad at age 90 and listening to him talk and seeing his reflection of me, I'm more aware of my limitations and much more eager to hear how we can partner and see what we could do together. So that's my invitation to you. I don't know where that goes. I can't wait to find out. Now, that said, I want to tell you that this afternoon you're gonna hear from several young researchers. One of the things we tried to do this year is bring in some new people. So we've got people that are part of the infant study who are young investigators, graduate students even. We've got postdoctoral fellows. So you're going to also hear today from the future of DCC research, the content, but also the faces. And so whatever decisions come out of this, whatever instigation comes out of all of this discussion will guide their future. So ask your questions, because every time we leave here, I know we all leave with a list of ideas because we can't help ourselves. Somebody brought up this, somebody thought of this. We should do a study that does this. It all goes into this big hopper of trying to figure out this puzzle and then bring it back to you. Any questions for me? Sorry. What? Oh, the next talk is virtual. Okay. Yes, question for me. Right. Yeah. And that's where I didn't want to get lost in the weeds of that here. I'm more wanting the people that ask those kind of questions to put yourselves forward because we need a team that's going to work together to figure out a plan. Um, we're aware of some of the tools from our side and have some ideas, but we haven't vetted it out. We haven't figured it out. Why don't you, yeah, reach out to me and I will gather names and I will put them together and give them to Deona. Um, I know there's several people from the board meeting that are excited about this and there's much more support from the families about doing this. So yes, reach out to me. And that's lkpaul@mac.com. That's the easiest one. lkpaul@mac.com. You can email me. Nope. Come find me. Welcome. I hope you have a great weekend, everybody.